All right, today we are making the dolls a bunch of donuts, mainly because I was craving donuts this weekend. It's too cold and blizzardy outside to go to the grocery store, so I had to make do by making them for the dolls out of polymer clay. Stay tuned and see how fun and easy this project is. All right, the only polymer clay we're using today is Original Sculpt, but you can use any white clay. You don't need to have a nice firm clay for this project because there's no real fine details. These are pretty basic shapes. So off camera, I went ahead and rolled a bunch of little balls of clay. These are right around 1/4 inch in diameter. I prepped my chalk, so I had chalk on my fingers still, so there's a little chalk on them, so just ignore that. And then I've got these balls here. I've got 4 of them that are just slightly bigger. They're not quite 3/8 of an inch, probably about halfway between 1/4 inch and 3/8 of an inch. Those are for my favorite from the donut store. So you make nice little balls, kind of flatten them out a little bit, and then take a pointed tool. I like this one. This is part of a set of clay tools. And you can get tools like this. You could even use a like a sharpened dowel or the end of a paintbrush, something like that that's got a nice point to it, that's got some depth to it. So we've got that, and now I'm going to turn it over. And now if you have a little bit of clay stuck in that center, I'm going to put you guys over to the side so I don't smush you doing this. And kind of even it out. Then, since I've got this in my hand, I'm going to go around the side and just make little tickling motions. It's better if you hold it between your finger and your thumb. And what I like to refer to is the equator. We're going to kind of tease that just a bit to give it that iconic donut shape. Because after all, we want people to look at this and say, ah, that's a donut. We don't like that, what is it question. That's never fun. So I'm going to go all the way around. I'm only going to do one on camera of each shape, and then I will go ahead and turn the camera off and get these done off camera. All right, so those are going to be like that, and I'm going to do all the plain ones that way. Then these slightly larger balls, I'm going to kind of roll them into a shape like that, and then just kind of flatten that. And that's going to be, where I grew up on the West Coast, it's called a maple bar. There's also chocolate ones. I guess other places they call them a long john, and there's probably other names for them if you live someplace else and you have these and they're called something else. What are they called? So I am going to then do the same thing around the edges. You want those rounded corners though. You don't want this to be, you don't want to roll out a piece of clay and cut a rectangle because you want that roundness to the corners and to the edges. And this doesn't really, it seems like a tedious job, but it's not, it's super easy to do. I find this part of the project really relaxing. Try not to smush your pieces down with your fingers as you're texturing them. So I am going to turn the camera off. I'm going to texture and shape all of these, and when they're done, I'll come back and we'll add some chalk to them, and then I can bake them. So I'll be right back. All right, now that these are all textured and I've worked on the shapes and they're okay, so now it's time to do some coloring to these. So I have my chalks. We only need two today. We need a yellow ochre and we need a reddish brown. I'm using a slightly lighter reddish brown because I pulled out a different set of chalks and this one looked interesting. So I've got my paper plate off there behind the camera. And I'm only going to do one of each shape on camera, and then I'm going to turn the camera off and do the rest of these. So I've got separate brushes for both since I'm going to be going back and forth a little. So I've got a slightly larger eyeshadow brush. Now when I use chalks, these are artist chalks, artist pastel chalks, they go by different names. They're not oil pastels, they're a chalk, they're a dry chalk. When I use those, I almost always use a eyeshadow brush. This is just a cheap makeup brush, probably from the dollar store. I know this one is from either the dollar store or Walmart. Very inexpensive. But since eyeshadow brushes are designed to put on powder, I find they work so much better than trying to use a paintbrush to put on this dry powder. Dip it in and knock off most of it. And I like to do these on the palm of my hand. And now when I go to do the whole thing, what I'll do is I will do all of them with one color chalk, and then I'll clean everything up and I'll pick up the second color chalk. Now with this color, I am going to coat the entire thing. I'm going to go ahead and get one of these guys in my hand at the same time. Looks like I missed the little bit in the center there. That's okay. This is also a good time to go over, make sure, kind of triple check your shapes and make sure everything is shaped just how you want it. So I'm just gently brushing with the yellow ochre chalk. And this chalk can go everywhere. This we don't need to keep off of the sides. This one we can do everywhere. Now, for the reddish brown, I have a slightly smaller brush. And it's a slightly stiffer brush. I have a little more control with this one. Dipped it in the reddish brown chalk and I'm knocking off most of it. And this we just want on the very top and bottom. We don't want a lot. And I'd rather dip back in and get a second batch than put too much on the first coat. Excuse these very squeaky sounding airplane flying over. That is a weird sounding airplane. I'm not sure if it's coming across on the camera or not, but it sounds very odd. All right, now I'm going to roll these over. One of the things I prefer about doing them in the palm of my hand is I find sometimes when I do them on the tile, I end up with a pool of the eyeshadow underneath them, and that's hard to blend. When I flip them over to do the second side, it gets really hard to blend and it makes for funky looking marks. On the palm of my hand, I very seldom get that. Now let's look at the sides. So see, we've got the sides have no color or less color than the top. So I'm going to turn the camera off. I'm going to do all of them in yellow ochre, then all of them with the reddish brown, and then I'm going to bake these at the recommended temperature for 10 minutes before I create our icing to put on the top. So when these are all baked and cooled, I will be back and we can move to our next step. All right, our little mini donuts are all baked and they just came out of the oven, so I'm going to let them cool. While they're cooling, I'm going to work on our icing that we're going to use. And once again, we are going to use TLS, which I've got in 4 little pools here, with oil paints to color it. We did this last week for our cheesecake plating, and I am going to use it again this week. So I've got just a tiny bit of white. White is going to be the hardest one to see when it's mixed in, but we're just going to mix that in. Don't put too much oil paint in. It just takes just the tiniest amount. That's titanium white. Oops. That one is burnt umber. I have rose madder, and I have some yellow ochre. So let's get some nice burnt umber here. And remember, it will bake a little darker than it is on the foil. My only concern, I'm always worried when I do white, it is so hard to make sure you are mixed. Now what I want to do is take a little bit of white and just a touch of that red. You will need a cool red to create a pink that's pretty, or a red also. A lot of reds I've noticed when you bake them with TLS or Kato's liquid clay or any of the liquid clays, they turn kind of an ugly peachy orange, which sometimes works, but most of the time I find it's just not an attractive color. So hopefully this pink will stay pretty. I want just a tiniest drop of the dark along with this. Move that into here. What I want to get is kind of a maple frosting color. That's pretty close to what I want. That will work. Yeah, I'm kind of sort of under camera. All right. Get this one mixed a little more. All right, so I'm going to scoot these all off of here. I think I'll put this off the side. Now I am going to figure out where I put my, I do want to bake on a piece of parchment paper. This is kind of a dirty one, but that's fine. I don't like to use liquid Sculpey and then bake directly on the paper plate because it will adhere to the paper plate. I can get it off the parchment. I can't necessarily get it off of the paper. So we're just going to, and I'm going to try and do this under camera as best I can. For the first couple, I will do some off camera. And there will be pictures on the blog post, so be sure and check the blog post. I notice I get a lot of questions lately, and I love answering your questions, don't get me wrong. I encourage you to ask questions. But sometimes it takes me a while to get back to you, and several questions I've gotten lately have been things that were answered in the blog post, and I simply directed the person to go to the blog post to get that information. So had they checked the paired blog post to the video they were asking about, they would have had their answer a lot quicker. Let's get, and I'll probably not do these in my fingers when I'm not trying to stay under camera. Oh, I just stuck my finger in oil paint. That was not what I wanted to do. Fill in your hole, kind of do that. Put that over here. Yeah. Let me prevent myself from making a bigger mess. Let's do, yeah, this will be much easier when I'm not trying to stay under camera. And I forgot to get my no-hole beads. I am going to get some no-hole beads and sprinkle on a few of these to look like sprinkles. Now let's use white for this. Come on. There we go. Trying to get it. There, that's what I want. There. So I am going to finish glazing these. Then I'm going to bake them again at recommended temperature for another 10 minutes so that the liquid Sculpey cures. And when that's done, I'll come back and I'll show you what they look like. So I'll be right back. All right, here are our donuts, all coated with icing and baked off and starting to cool. Now this one I actually did for the purists in the Dollhouse family. I just coated it with some plain TLS was hoping to give it kind of a glazed donut look, which I think it does replicate very nicely. I'd like to figure out a way to make it maybe have a little bit of a whitish tinge like a lot of glazed donuts do, but I'm happy with that. I did different combinations of the colors of icing we did. I did add on 1, 2, 3, 4 of them, some of the micro beads that I have in my stash. Mine happen to be from Martha Stewart, and I've had these 20 years or more probably, and I know this particular batch is not available anymore, but they still sell micro beads. Sometimes they call micro beads, sometimes they call them no-hole beads. They're just very tiny little glass beads. And as you can see, that container is almost full, and I've been using it for many, many years, and I've used a lot of them. They go a long way, so they're a little spendy, but they do last you for pretty much forever unless you spill them. So I love how these turned out. I hope you do too. Be sure and check the blog post for photos, for lists of what I used, all the colors I used, all of that stuff will be over there. Be sure and hit the like button if you enjoyed the video. Leave me a comment. What food videos would you like to see? What do your dolls need to have in the coming months? Let me know so that I can get them made. If you enjoy my content and haven't subscribed, I encourage you to hit that subscription button and the notification bell so you know when I put out a new video. If you have subscribed, I thank you, and I thank you for watching the video, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.